Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to episode 168 of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4Wheel Parts. Today we have Sean Holman coming on. He is the Truck and Off-Road Group Content Director for MotorTrend Group, which means he's involved in like every major publication for MotorTrend Group. It's just crazy how many things he's involved with. But he's also the co-host of the Truck Show podcast, which is roughly at about 71 episodes right now and just crushing it with content. So it's really good to be able to talk to Sean for roughly an hour here and get all sorts of feedback and lessons learned and best practices and advice. Like, it's crazy. I don't know where else you can get this type of information, but I'm really grateful that Sean was able to spend some time with us. So we're going to go through a few things in the intro here, and then we'll get into the episode with Sean. So first off, let me tell you about 4Wheel Parts. They are crushing it right now with sales, and they're crushing it with exposure as well. Like, there's so many big time racers out there that are linking up with 4Wheel Parts. It's crazy. I'm seeing them like all over the place. Joey D is just crushing it out there right now. He's all over the place. So check out 4wheelparts.com to find out some of the deals that they have going on. There's on their Instagram site too, they've got the Dirt by 4Wheel Parts. It's this pretty cool publication that they're running, so you can catch up on all of the cool off-road things that are happening. They're also supporting another podcast as well with Jim Beaver, so pretty cool stuff there. So either way, if you go and just start adding stuff to your cart, you'll find out all these cool overstock deals that they have, 25% off a lot of different things. So I've been finding that for a number of cool items. But for whatever reason, if you add all these things to your cart and you're like, wow, it's expensive, I don't know if I can cover this right now, you can get financing through Synchrony Car Care Card. So there's lots of cool stuff there. But I definitely encourage you to check it out, see what's available, get your ride dialed in for this summer. And then beyond that, we've got a lot of amazing partners that we're working with right now, and we have been for quite some time, so I'm very happy to have these folks on board. AMSOIL, they provide amazing lubrication products, and they are a company that runs on freedom. You can find out more at amsoil.com/rider. SolderWeld, they produce game-changing metal bonding technology, and they're ready to rescue your race. TopThePodium.com, they're experts in motorsports sponsorship and website creation. Bold Racing, they're a family race team, and GSP XTV Axle Specialist. And then Crash Addict Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. I also want to shout out our other partners, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, GSP XTV, Diode Dynamics, and High Octane Coffee. In a minute, we're going to get into our little segment with Joey Sylvester of High Octane Coffee, the marketing tune-up. But before that, I just want to ask you all this short little favor. If you've been listening to the show and you haven't left a rating or a review yet on iTunes, please do so. It's just a huge thing for this podcast. It's great for exposure, great for being able to attract and retain new guests. So head over to iTunes, leave that rating and review. And if this is the first time you've ever listened to it, I encourage you to do the same, but also go back and listen to some of our other shows, because we bring on different disciplines. So you get to hear from NASCAR sometimes, from NHRA folks, from motocross, ATV, there's different variations there. So go back and listen to a couple of other variations of the show. But that's it. Now we're going to get into the marketing tune-up with Joey, and then we'll hop into the episode right after that.
What's up, guys? Joe Sylvester here with your High Octane Coffee marketing tune-up. Today I want to mention something that actually, it may seem very, very simple and very, very easy, but a lot of people overlook it and don't think about it. And it's what is known as, I guess, the low-hanging fruit for your sponsorship program. Sometimes people overcomplicate things when it comes to approaching companies about sponsorship. Go after the companies that you've already got a relationship with, companies that you may already be buying product from, or say maybe even a company that has a relationship with one of your current sponsors. For example, maybe you're at a trade show and you know that your representative from a particular sponsor that you already have happens to be friends with some other guy that's a representative for another company that you also feel you could add value to their marketing program. Don't be afraid to ask your rep, hey, I know I've been working with you guys. I feel I can add to these guys' program as well. Could you give me an introduction to this company, to this particular representative? Chances are they'll gladly do it for you. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the things that all the companies that are hanging right in front of you that you can grab pretty easily. Same as with companies that you've already been buying product from. You probably have a representative of that company that you're purchasing the product from. Reach out to them. Say, hey, I've been using your product now for a while. I feel I can use my marketing to help benefit your company in the future. Who would I speak to about your marketing program? Things like that. Don't try to think too crazy and hard about it and try to think of companies that you have no relationship with. Go after the easy ones first.
Today we got a special guest. I guess every guest is really special, but I'm pretty excited about this one because it's kind of like a podcast mashup here. But we got Sean Holman on. He is the Truck and Off-Road Group Content Director for MotorTrend Group and also co-host of the Truck Show podcast. So Sean, that's a lot of cool stuff already, but fill in the gaps, Nat. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, it's funny. We joke on our show that the more words you have in your title, the more important you must be, right?
That's it.
I've got many titles. I do a lot of different things, but my primary day job is, as you said, I'm the Truck and Off-Road Group Content Director for MotorTrend Group, which means I oversee magazines and brands you've probably heard of: Truck Trend, Truckin', Diesel Power, Peterson's 4 Wheel and Off-Road, JP, and 4-Wheeler, among others. And then my also day job is co-host and co-creator of our own podcast here at MotorTrend Group that we launched March of last year. So a little bit over a year ago now, and that's the Truck Show podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fun one too. I just started getting into it. You and your co-host Lightning have some really good times together, so I'm excited to get more into that show. I'm a big time audiobook listener, and I've been just pounding through the audiobooks over the past year. I got about 2 hours in the car every day, and I've just been pounding them out. And my brain's like, look, dude, you got to back off for just a minute and just listen to some cool stuff. So I just got into I got a couple of your episodes queued up. I got a few episodes of the Racers HQ podcast, which teaches you vehicle dynamics and a lot of stuff about autocross.
Nice.
So I'm getting into that, and then I got a few more on my list. So I'm just going to start pounding those out and take a break from the mindset and personal development stuff for a minute.
What's interesting is there's a ton of growth here in the automotive podcasting landscape over the past, probably 2 years or so. And when we decided to launch our show, we wanted to be different than the offerings that were currently out there. So if anybody's, listening or looking for a podcast a little bit wacky, a little bit irreverent, a little bit goofy, check ours out. And so what I did was I partnered with a friend of mine who was a local radio DJ and producer for K-Rock, 106.7 K-Rock in Los Angeles, and as my co-host. And so he and I do it, but it's very much like a morning show. And so while there's some great truck podcasts out there that go real deep into a niche, we're real broad. So we do lifted, we do lowered, we do off-road, on-road, custom, OE, everything that has to do with trucks, we cover it, and we do it in the morning show format with wacky intros and bumpers and just goofy selves and, really great guests. So we have a lot of fun doing it, and it's not your basic podcast where, a couple of people are talking their iPhone around like their mom's basement table or something like that. We have really good audio production, and that way it's a very listenable show in the car. So we're really proud of kind of, bringing something interesting and unique to the podcast space for automotive enthusiasts.
Yeah, there was one thing that I noticed right off the bat with your show, really good intro quality, and when you're talking, it was good stuff. But one thing I liked, it's actually something that, there's another one I listened to, New York Times, The Daily, and you did this cool little thing for this the show. I'm gonna mess it up again. Overland Expo-isode. But for that one, I got it. I thought I was gonna mess that up. I should have practiced it or something. But there was this spot where you were doing an interview with somebody else, and I think you were the one that was on site doing the interview. But either way, what happened was you guys were talking about it, and then it went to the interview. for a little bit, and then it came back to you two talking, and you could tell it was all post-production, but it was really cool. And the Daily does a lot of that, and it's pretty neat. Where actually I'm gonna start playing around with it, I think, because it's kind of fun. Where you pop in, you pop out, you pop in, you pop out. I don't know. I kind of like that stuff.
It brings lightning into it. If I'm out, for my day job, I'm always out at the events. So we have a 2-microphone mobile rig that I'll bring with me that we can record, really close to studio quality audio out in the field, about as close as you can get anyway. And we've done a lot of remotes. He and I just got back from Daytona Truck Meet, which is the biggest truck show in the Southeast. Last year at SEMA, we did 5 episodes from inside the Lund booth on the mezzanine. They set us up a little area there. Overland Expo and a bunch of different places. But what we like to do is bring the listeners along for these adventures. We even did one where we went with our presenting sponsor Nissan to Morocco, and I brought a show from the sand dunes of Morocco. And it gives us a chance to bring the listener closer into what we're doing and my co-host. And so that way, if one of us is out in the field doing interviews and stuff, the other one can be a part of it. And then we break in and we bust on each other, and we have a good time with it. And really it's a labor of love. For my day job, this was sort of I guess R&D test kitchen, if you will, for areas of media that are growing that the company wanted to get into, and we were able to build a business case and said, all right, well, we both are really interested in the space. Let's see what we can do. Yeah,
definitely. To your point earlier where you said there's been a lot of growth in the automotive podcast space in the past 2 years, that's very true. My show has been around for about 2.5 years, and even when I entered, I mean, there was a decent amount of shows, but I feel like I look on the top podcast list, and every other day there's something new popping up. It's good for my standpoint, other than a lot of these shows do better to buy. Like, dang it, come on, guys. But it's pretty cool to see that. I mean, it's just a massive growth. But that's actually one of the things that I was going to talk about on this show a little bit, is just around content creation. There are a lot of people listening to this that are looking for what else they can do, and some people have done YouTube and stuff, but some people you could do podcasts. I know of a couple of guests that have gone down that route where they've figured out something that they were good at or they could talk about, and they created a podcast for it. I've got a group. It's a really tiny Facebook group. There's like 17 of us on there, and we're all motorsports podcasters, so if you got a question or something, you can, ping somebody on there. But
nice.
But it's like,
great idea.
There's just so many cool things you can talk about in motorsports. I would love to do like 3 or 4 of these things, these shows. I always come up with ideas or things to talk about, and it's like, man, I just run out of time, energy, focus, all the above.
Yeah.
Bandwidth.
For us, I oversee, all the outbound content, whether it's digital, print, video, social, all those for all of my brands and MotorTrend Group. So on top of other parts of my job that are very administrative or business strategy based. And so, having the proper bandwidth, we've literally put out a show once a week for the past, 75 weeks,
right,
plus some bonus ones without fail. So it's hard. It's a grind to do it. But like I said, when you love it, and the podcast space is really fascinating because it's sort of, if people don't know what podcasting is, you can sort of describe it as the Netflix of audio.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that are starting to get away from satellite and terrestrial radio and listen to podcasts. And there's room for all of us out there because, a lot of people are out doing their thing. And the nice thing about podcasts over any other form of media is the fact that, if in our case at MotorTrend Group, what do? We profess the love of driving. And guess what you can't do while reading print, watching videos, doing social? You can't do those things while driving. What can you do while driving? You can listen to an audio program. So part of our, pivot with this show was to give our users a 360-degree media experience where once they got off the couch away from either, MotorTrend channel on TV or got away from YouTube or got away from their phone, when they're in an environment where they need to multitask because maybe they're driving, maybe they're mowing the lawn. In the case of some of our listeners, they're in the combine, out, in the field at their farm, and they have an opportunity to engage with our content because it's audio and it allows them to multitask. And so that's really the value of podcasting. And I just saw the recent Insight reports come out from Edison, and this is the first time where Americans over the age of 12, where more than 50% of that user group has said they've heard or listened to a podcast in the last year. So it went from this 44% last year, 41% the year before, I believe. And so the exponential growth in the space is it's amazing. And people are just trying to find those good shows. And you know, I'd say the hardest thing about a podcast right now is just discoverability. If you can figure out how to market your show, there's a listener out there for you.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've struggled with that, just trying to get the show out there. And, you know, I've relied heavily on social media for that over the past, but social media is getting a little crowded right now too.
Yes, it is.
as I'm sure you're well aware.
Let's see, Truckin' Magazine is actually, I think, our biggest social platform or brand. It's got something like 3.9 million followers. It's actually bigger than Hot Rod, which is surprises a lot of people. And Four Wheeler and Peterson's are both over, you know, 1.5 million or 2 million, something like that. And even for our show launching, we were partners with Facebook back when they were trying to grow the platform. And so they had turned the taps up big time to, you know, help grow the platform and get followers and all that. Well, since then, as most people can attest, brand building on social is a very difficult endeavor now than it was, you know, way more difficult than it was, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And so while we can be more engaging, and podcasting has proven to be more engaging, it's hard to gather in the people to follow your brand because they're following so many other things. So you really have to be unique to stand out. And social media, well, I think everybody needs to be there. It's not the end all be all anymore as it was, you know, 5 years ago. Yeah,
definitely. You know, I launched a live version of the show just on Facebook number of months back now. I think I do 2 every month. So I just finished episode 33. And when it first came out, I mean, I could just do anything, not put any effort into it at all, and it would get, you know, a decent amount of engagement and a ton of views. And now it's like I put out a show, and even if it's a better, or at least in my opinion, a better content show, I struggle to get it out there. It's pretty interesting. You know, you got to throw some significant dollars behind it to get it in front of even your own audience, right? Like even your own people that follow you.
That's part of the thing is, you know, for our company, we helped, you know, the social media companies build their platforms, yet we don't have access to our own people that we gathered in for them. And so, you know, from being there for a long time and seeing the beginning days to seeing kind of how you're treated now, and, you know, everybody trying to monetize, it's difficult. It's not the slam dunk it once was, that's for sure. We have to be more creative now.
Definitely. Well, that was a great intro there, but I want to know a little bit more about you. I mean, there's lots of cool things that it sounds like you've done, you know, cool shows you've been a part of, awesome magazines, great content. I just want to know your story, though. I want to know a little bit more about how you got into motorsports in the first place. Like, why did you even choose this path? And then I want you to take us down that path.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of automotive and magazines and all that kind of stuff. As a kid growing up, I had, you know, I believe 13 magazine subscriptions. So everything from Car and Driver and MotorTrend to Auto Week and Popular Mechanics and, you know, Popular Science. And so I was always reading. And I remember the editor of Car and Driver at the time, Chubba said best, in a response to a letter about how do I get into the magazine world, and it was basically, you know, you need an engineering degree, you need this, and you need that, and it was very discouraging. And I just started laughing, like, well, I'll never be a magazine guy. And you know, I actually had pursued law enforcement, was in law enforcement for a while, went to the academy, all that kind of stuff. So another life. And decided that I didn't want to end up, you know, pursuing that for my own personal reasons for a career. And while I was crewing my jets, I worked for Boeing doing fire security for a couple of years, and it was kind of a really interesting time. It was during the Columbia disaster during September 11th, and you know, working with a security clearance in a, you know, high value, you know, aerospace plant like that was sort of a crazy experience. And what I was doing was working graveyards at the time. I had a friend who worked for a small B2B publishing company, and I was Bobbitt Media here in Southern California. And he said, hey, I'm looking for some freelancing. I know you love cars. I know you love to write. Are you interested in maybe picking up some side jobs? And so I started doing a little bit of freelancing on the side for auto trim and restyling, modern tire dealer, and a few other, I believe, truck and SUV performance, and ended up finding out there was an opening through a mutual friend that I had met on some of these programs while freelancing. And so she gave me the information to apply, and she says, look, I know you're an off-road guy, but there's an opening at Trucking Magazine. Might be a great way for you to get your foot in the door. And so I said, sure, yeah, let's try this. And so I ended up getting hired there, worked for Trucking SUV, which was a spin-off of Trucking. And I would work from an associate editor up to their road test editor, and kind of cemented myself in that role. Got hired, promoted up to our Los Angeles office to be the tech editor at Four Wheeler Magazine. Did that for about 8 years. Four Wheeler was amazing. I raced in the Baja 1000. I used to race with the Halls, and so shout out to the Hall family. Obviously, having recently lost Rod. Amazing guy, amazing family. Loved racing with them. There's always going to be a soft spot in my heart for the Hall family for taking me in. In fact, while at Four Wheeler was the first time I'd met Rod, was during the introduction of the Hummer H1 Alpha. Okay. And so we were out in the Reno area, and he and his sons and some family friends were hired by General Motors, by the Hummer brand, to, take journalists out and show them the new H1 Alpha and the backcountry around Reno. And I'll never forget a couple things. Rod said, people will say something that kind of sticks the rest of your career. And it's so simple. Like the thing that Rod was able to do is he was always really able to distill, complex subjects down to a real simple one-liner. And he said, I'll give $100 to anybody who has less scratches on their driver's door than their passenger's door, because I've never seen it, right? Because everybody tries to avoid. And here are these great big wide Hummers going through on a desert brush, and it's like there's no way you're not scraping, both sides of these things. Right. And another thing he said was, get off your jounces. If you're your jounces, you're overdriving the suspension. Slow down. And that's always one of those things that's so simple, but a lot of people are real lead-footed, and they just crash through the jounces or their suspension. They beat up the vehicle, they beat up themselves, and they don't know to back up, smooth as fast. And so those are like little lessons that I learned from Rod and being exposed to them. And I had first raced at the Terrible 250 sometime back in like 2005 or something like that. And I was with Josh Hall. It was the first time I'd ever been in a race truck. And I was in the Hummer. And back then it was a two-seater. It was the yellow one. And so I was in the passenger seat. My first race, I was in charge of making sure they had some big old Fox shocks. That thing weighed like 8,000 pounds in race form. It was just massive. It had like 8 inches of travel. And they had these big, at the time they were maybe 3-inch Fox shocks. They had thermal, thermal sensors on there. And so part of the dash on it was to keep tabs, because at a certain temperature level, the seals would melt and you'd lose your shocks. And so on that big old heavy thing, you were always fighting that, especially when the ambient air temperature was 100 degrees outside in the desert. And so Josh and I went out and started the race. It was awesome. And I'm paying more attention to the all the sensors and everything coming through the dashboard than I am to the horizon, and I start getting sick. And I don't know if I'm sure your listeners probably know Bob Bauer, who's was with BFG for a long time and great guy. Anyway, Bob had told me, don't trick yourself, don't do anything out of the ordinary, don't trick your body by eating something that you wouldn't normally. And so I don't normally have a big breakfast. And so I hadn't had a big breakfast. And one of the guys came up and gave me a Clif Bar, said, you need to eat something for the race. I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. No, you need to eat. Well, that was a mistake. And so I ended up getting sick, keeping it down, getting sick, keeping it down. And then I just couldn't anymore. And Ralph threw my helmet all over the inside of the truck. Which is like everybody's worst fear.
That is.
Racing, right? Like that's, and it's happened to everybody. There's not anybody out there who hasn't co-dogged for somebody and gotten sick at some point. Like it's just part of the deal. And you're so embarrassed, and it sucks. And it's like, really end up not a big deal. Everybody goes through it. And it's in that truck because the regular co-driver was so tall, and the cowl on a Hummer was so high, and most people would get sick in it because they were below the horizon when they sat in the truck. And so anyway, Josh gets on the radio and he says, all right, we're coming into the pits, co-driver change. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're racing. He looks at me, he's like, what? You okay? I'm like, dude, we're racing. So I hung on for, like 100 miles, 125 miles before he was scheduled to pit. And barf all over me. I felt good. We kept going. And Josh ended up winning that race.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Ended up giving me the trophy.
Nice.
And said, well, I was one of the toughest co-drivers that he'd ever been with. And in fact, later that year, they invited me down to the Baja 1000. Everybody rode with Rod. My name was on Josh's door. And he let me, I was the only journalist to co-dog for him in that 1000. And I believe that was 06. And we won stock full. And I did a pretty good section of it during the middle of the night from Bay of LA to San Ignacio, I believe. And that was a crazy race. And if you remember, that year was, I believe, the crossover year for Pastrana.
Oh.
He crashed his car, and we came by, and there was like upside down, and one tire was on fire and was like slowly burning. And we like drove by, and I'm thinking, neither of us said anything to each other. And at the end, I'm like, "Did you see that car?" He's like, "Yeah, I did. I didn't want to say anything." I'm like, me either, And cause we were in race mode. And it's funny because when you're racing in Baja, you get in these really weird like undulations where you start getting sleepy, and you sort of just start, drifting off because you're crashing over stuff. Your body just sort of, finds its rhythm. And I remember Josh had Ironman the entire race.
Oh, wow.
For 3 years I raced down there with him. And he was making fun of me because I was falling asleep. Well, the Hummer had a windshield, so we were in the cactus garden, and he was kind of would fade the Hummer over and was throwing cactus bulbs and hitting me. And so I would wake up trying to pull cactus bulbs out of my race suit while he was laughing at me and stuff. But I mean, those are some great times and just great experience that I've had a chance to do at four-wheeler. I also, kind of the other thing that I do is a lot of consulting for some of the big companies. And so I've seen, or been a part of the several vehicles. I was the first person to break the news about Raptor when it first came out. In fact, was blackballed by Ford for a while, and ended up them coming back around and telling me that, hey, if you wouldn't have broke that story, we wouldn't have seen how big the guerrilla marketing would have been from the internet and from potential buyers. And they brought me back in to have an exclusive story on
Nice.
The Raptor. And so, there's little moments like that where still to this day, I see, one of the first gen Raptors, and I'm like, yep, I was, had a little piece of that. I was one of the first people to be a part of the JL. I saw JL 2 years earlier before it came out. And then there's other stuff I'm working on now that I'm under embargo or non-disclosure agreements, but some significant products are coming out in the next several years. But from four-wheeler, I was doing on the side some side magazines called JK Garage, 4x4 Garage series that were like a SIP, one-shots we were doing. And then I became the editor-in-chief of Diesel Power magazine for a while. And then I took over Truck Trend Network as the content director, and then eventually took over four-wheeler as well and put both of those under my belt as the group content director. So I've had sort of a really weird experience and done a lot of neat things. And I'm somebody that couldn't be stuck in a room filing all day. I have to be doing something different. And this job allows me to have a different experience every day. And I'm coming up on 17 years at the same company, which is pretty unheard of, even though we've been bought and sold about 7 times during those 17 years. But essentially the same company.
No, that's awesome. I was thinking back too when you brought up Four Wheeler Magazine early on. I know I had a subscription to Four Wheeler Magazine. I had MotorTrend. I had other ones too. Like I went through a series of different types of ones, but those two I felt like I always had a copy on my hand. Like I used to know all the stats for like every car, every truck out there. I knew all of it. And it's just, you grew up and I kind of lost touch with some of those things. But I'm hoping I can pick back up on a few things with a few of these other podcasts too. I need to get back into maybe not. I don't know if I'll ever return to my original form. I was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'll ever get back there.
That knowledge, I call it truck minutia, took up so much of my brain that I've probably forgotten more than I know now.
Oh yeah, I know. I'll see a car, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's wait, hold on, which one is that? I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna say anything. I can't remember anymore, but it's cool.
Yeah,
trust me.
It's cool. Cool when you see it.
Exactly. Well, cool. So today, I mean, what are the things that you're really excited about right now?
Man, we got so much stuff going on right now. We just had a really successful Overland Expo, Overland Adventures we talked about earlier. We partnered with the new owners of Overland Expo, and we're the official media partners, and we did a 3-day Overland trip with four-wheeler into Overland Expo called Overland Adventure. which was phenomenal. Last week we have a digital series we call Week to Wheelin'. We built a complete Bronco from the ground up with no donor vehicle, using all aftermarket and repop parts.
Awesome.
Some amazing sponsors on that over at
Awesome.
ForWheel.com. Like in a week, literally in a week. It was a frame and a painted body on Sunday, and it was doing a burnout in our back lot on Friday.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool. And then, I'm excited about some stuff we have coming up. Of course, there's a ton of really great and anticipated vehicles coming out soon, whether it's Bronco or Defender or the next versions of what Jeep's had in the works for updates. Raptor is a V8 Raptor on the horizon.
Nice.
We'll see. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Ram, has a Raptor fighter that may be the most legitimate one, and if things I hear are correct, it's going to be amazing. And then from a work standpoint, we've got a big show or weekend that we're talking about with Jeep right now called the Sand Jam. That will be later on in September, where it'll be like a enthusiast get together. I believe it's September 6th and 7th out at Silver Lake in Michigan.
Hey,
got,
wait, what day is this now? Hold on now. I live right by here.
Yeah, there you go. So Friday the 6th and Saturday the 7th of September. So we're working on a big Jeep event out there, which I think is going to be pretty awesome. I'm going to be, hopefully, sounds like anyway, returning to the Baja 1000 this year. A good friend of mine, Mel Wade, who owns Off-Road Evolution, asked if I wanted to help co-pilot and drive their Gladiator that they're going to be running in the stock class. And so I'm super stoked on that because I haven't been racing in Baja since 09 or 10, and it's been a while. So excited about that. And then, of course, we've got our of the year events coming up later on this year to choose, what the next great vehicles are. And it's just, there's so much stuff. We've got the Overland Expo East coming up, where it looks like we're going to partner with the Overland Expo crew again and do a similar event on the East Coast. So there's just always something going on in our world. And on top of all that, working to possibly expand our podcast offerings here at MotorTrend Group and continue our path of growth and success with the truck show.
That's awesome. I got a few things I got to follow up on there. First off, the September 6th and 7th. I heard about this event that MotorTrend was coming and doing something at Silver Lake, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's real or not. That could be a hoax, but it looks like it's real. That's awesome. I'm just 2 hours away from there, which is awesome. The challenge, and a lot of people listening right now are snowmobilers. They're like, oh, that's Heydays. So do you know what Heydays is? It's not, mostly just snowmobilers know about that, but it's this big,
no, I don't.
Massive event in Minnesota that they do. It's like 50,000 people come.
Wow.
It is, incredible. Everybody is there. So now I got to do some logisticating to figure out how I'm going to do this.
You mean adult Tetris on your schedule, I like to call it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to try to, because this sounds pretty awesome. Plus, I go to Silver Lake 2 or 3 times a year, so,
should be a good time. We've got some pretty cool things planned. It hasn't been officially announced yet, but it should be shortly. So stay tuned. There'll be some more information on that here, and hopefully in the next week or so.
Perfect. So it's still kind of a rumor right now, but it's a real rumor. Which
it's a real rumor. We got some stuff we're working on. I think people will be surprised at the party we're going to be able to pull off. So awesome. I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome. Well, the next thing too is just Overland. You were at the Overland Expo and you've got some partnerships there, and it's just a booming market right now. I've had a few people on the show that are pretty involved with overlanding, and
Sure.
Me personally, like I'm interested in it too.
The dirty secret of overlanding is we've all done it before. It's called car camping.
It's called car camping, but that's not cool.
Right.
That's
right.
Not cool.
And suddenly it has this name overlanding attached to it. So what cracks me up is everybody's like, oh, dude, overlanding. I built a Toyota 4Runner for SEMA in 09 or 10 with a complete overlanding theme that was wrapped in a topo map that was in Toyota's booth. We built through four-wheeler that had a rooftop tent, that had ARB fridge, that had water in the bumper, water tanks in the bumper, that had a winch on a 4Runner, 10 years ago. And I always cracks me up. Oh, dude, look at my new Tacoma, look at my 4Runner, look what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, I literally did that 10 years ago. So it cracks me up to see, I was lucky enough to kind of be ahead of the curve on that. And I'm glad to see it finally taking off. But yeah, it is incredible. Overlanding is the land of farkles, and anybody who rides probably understands what a farkle is. And I almost thought of putting my plate on my next vehicle, like no farkles or something like that, or maybe just making fun of it on the farkle wagon. But the reality is that you don't know all the crap that you don't need until you go and you see what they are making and offering in the overland world. Is unbelievable. And if you're a gadget guy like I am anyway, you go to an overland expo and you start walking around and seeing what people are making, and you're just like, well, I need that. I didn't even know I needed that. And it's great. And my dad and I go camping all the time, and we have a man trip that's a 4-day trip every year. And so I've got all the stuff I need to be comfortable out of my vehicle. And a long time ago, you would have called that car camping. But I will say, as opposed to a cooler, sure nice having an ARB fridge or the metal fridge in the back. And, it's nice to have a awning that folds up and stows properly, and instead of a tarp tied to your station wagon, roof rails or something. So, it's nice to have comfortable camp chairs that fold down tight instead of like an old beach chair where, half the webbing is ripped and your butt's falling through the bottom, or somebody, ran over it with the truck, and so now the frame's all wonky. So I will say that I do love the elevated experience that overlanding offers. I just joke a little bit that we, been there, done that, but we still have a big emphasis on it in four-wheeler brand.
I would love to know who pitched this rebranding of this thing of car camping. Like, who did that?
Right.
How did everybody catch on at one time? I never understand how those things happen. Like, somebody somewhere decided we're going to make this happen. It's going to be a thing. And then it became a thing. Like, how did... I wish I could see that.
If I'm looking back in time, I'm looking at an ARB that's been there from the beginning, and they're going, we've been doing this for 40 years or whatever it happens to be. But I think once manufacturers started to lightweight some of their tents and make smaller versions to where you could put them on a Subaru or some of that, I think there were people in that sort of crossover SUV space going, well, this is a really great way to maximize our crossover. And so then now you start getting families involved. And I think as people have grown their families or their skill level or their adventures and their ability to go deeper, they need a bigger, tougher vehicle, more rugged vehicle. So they started going to pickup trucks, and then naturally kind of started bringing those SUV things over to the pickups. And I think that, I sort of have a theory of off-road motorsports and off-road performance in general. You can get a Hellcat today, right? Fairly cheap, affordable. Not that $80,000 is cheap, but in the world of, let's say, a Jeep Grand Cherokee with a Hellcat, all-wheel drive, C5, 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds or whatever, 707 horsepower. You try and take a Challenger, a Charger, or a Grand Cherokee, and you go look in the supercar world for what gives you more than 700 horsepower, the ability of all-wheel drive in the case of the Jeep, and that type of comfort level, and you're not going to find it for, $100 grand, or less than $100 grand more than what the Jeep costs. And so, but that's great. That's great on the street. The reality is your Mustang, your Camaro, your ZL1, your Corvettes, your, Ford GTs, you can't experience 10/10 of that vehicle on the pavement anymore. The laws are so strict. There's cameras everywhere. Like that one moment that you decide to dip into the throttle, you're going to see the popo behind you and you're getting a nice fat ticket, or your car impounded for testing it. What's amazing to me, and why I think you see the growth in the off-road world, is because you can still drive 10/10 off-road. Yeah, you can go get that Raptor. You can go get that, a pre-runner, and you can leave the pavement and be out in the desert, and you can cover a lot of ground in a day, and you can be driving at 8, 9, 10/10 and having a blast, and you don't have to worry about the repercussions of, breaking the law or whatever. You just have to be able to not outdrive yourself with the vehicle. And so I really see that adrenaline and that performance side of it. That's why off-road has been taking off. That's why the manufacturers are starting to look at the off-road world, and everybody's jumping in now finally. And it's because that's the last really bastion of performance for the four-wheeled vehicle, is being able to do that carefree out in the middle of the desert, and haul ass and do all those things you can't experience in the highway anymore.
That's a really good point. I've never honestly made that connection before. I appreciate you sharing that. Because I kind of wondered, like, why is off-road becoming more popular right now? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, these vehicles keep getting more and more capable and stuff, but, to get access to, like, a track is a lot harder to get access to a trail or, some
Absolutely.
sort of off-road area. So, yeah, to get yourself, a supercar and actually find a place to open it up is pretty difficult and expensive. First you get the car, and then you got to get access to a track and
insurance and tires and
it's crazy
and all that stuff. And you can take a basic, pickup truck and you can bolt a $5,000 suspension on it, and you can go to town and really push the limits and have that adrenaline shot and have that experience. And it's just a lot harder to be able to do that. And if you can access it at a lot lower price point.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I appreciate you sharing that too. Well, what I'm going to do right now is take a quick break to thank the sponsors for this podcast, and we'll come back to the main event. Let's talk about your truck for a minute. You can count on it to haul your vehicle and your gear to the track or to the trailhead, but I bet you never think about the motor oil. Here's why you should. Your oil is the only thing preventing your engine from wearing out and breaking down. To keep your truck running strong, look for an oil with added wear protection. Like, for example, AMSOIL Signature Series Synthetic Motor Oil. It delivers 75% more engine protection against horsepower loss and wear than is required by the leading industry standard. It provides the next level protection today's demanding engines need to keep running for years and to keep effortlessly towing your ride to the track. Go to AMSOIL.com/rider to find out more. Make the switch to AMSOIL Synthetic Motor Oil today to keep your vehicle running great.
Hey guys, George Hamill here to talk about SolderWeld's new off-road repair kit. If you're a racer of any type or an off-road enthusiast like myself, you're going to want to take a close look at this product that bonds metal on the spot. SolderWeld has combined some of their most elite products into one small kit that fits perfectly under your seat or strapped to a roll cage and allows you to make some insane fixes anywhere you go. How many of us have been in a race or out on the trail and got a rock chip in a radiator or brake line? We have seen a top-tier desert race team at the 2019 Min 400 taken out by a simple rock to the radiator. If they had an off-road repair kit on board, they could have been back up and running in just minutes. The kit includes everything you need to work on dirty aluminum, stainless steel, copper, and many other metals. SolderWeld's cutting-edge technology allows you to make these fixes with extremely low heat and incredibly high tensile strength, leaving you a lasting fix every time. Don't be that guy broke down on the side of the trail. Get your off-road repair kit today, and your friends will thank you.
Two questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you gotta check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is SponsoredRiderClubPodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistall of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least just see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. Family race team. Those are the first words that come to mind when I think of Bold Racing. And the next one is actually axles. Bold Racing is a premier distributor of GSP XTV axles. And if that wasn't cool enough, they just came out with an entirely new axle called the Revolution axle. It is a hollow tube axle. It's really cool. If you head over to their website, gspxtv.com, or you can find out more at boldracingltd.com, you can find out how this new axle technology works. So they are saying to view this as a fuse for your drivetrain. So the hollow tube CV axle twist technology actually increases the strength and reliability of the axle, and it also reduces stress on the drivetrain. Plus, honestly, it's super cool looking, and if people know me, they know that I really like cool looking stuff. So they come in this really cool gold color. Check it out. It's absolutely revolutionary. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are now in the main event. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the sponsorship tactics and strategies. We got a few things to cover here. Already, we've covered a ton of information. I love this stuff. I can talk about this stuff all day, every day. Hey, I kind of do that. That's kind of what I do with these shows. But I want to focus in right now a little bit on one of your specialties, which is content creation. There's just so many things you can do with content. Nowadays, there's a lot of platforms, a lot of options out there, and you've experienced probably all of them, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
So what do you think are the critical elements that make up good content? Like, for people listening, what are the things that they need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think that the number one thing is that the media and content creation platforms are fragmented. Not all the users are in one place like they used to be, like magazines back in the day. Now you can self-publish, right? So now there's a lot of noise from people who maybe don't have the credentials or that expertise. So you really, when I'm talking to people, the things that I tell them if they're in the content creation world or they're paying back a sponsor or doing media is you need to build authority, right? You need to be a voice of authority. You need to come across as if you know what you're talking about. And because in the internet world, there are so many people that are waiting for that gotcha moment to bust you. If you don't have the authority of what you're talking about, you can be found out really quick, and you can, that audience you have is hard fought but easily lost with a gap like that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I tell people is you need to be authentic. You need to be authentic to yourself when you're creating content and authentic to your passions. Because if you don't have authenticity, again, you're going to be found out, and then your words aren't going to carry weight. Obviously, credibility goes in there. And then the other thing that I think is really important is relevance. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of ideas and are either late to the party, or an idea that doesn't really have a lot of backing, or they just haven't fully baked it. So on the relevance meter, there isn't anyone who can relate to it. So you don't have an audience yet, and you don't have an audience willing to listen to you in a world of a million voices. Like in the podcast world alone, there's 600,000 active podcasts right now on Apple. How do you get discovered if you're not relevant in somebody's life? So you have to figure out what your angle is to make sure that you're relevant to somebody's world.
Yeah, that's something we talk about in the show, specifically around how you said authentic. I think it's pretty critical. for a number of reasons in the sponsorship world. One is to make sure that you're picking the right sponsor.
Sure.
If you are picking a brand or a product or a service or something to align yourself with, and you don't actually like them or the service or the product, it's just bad news. Absolute bad news. It feels bad. Everybody thinks it looks bad, sounds bad, just bad.
Yeah, don't chase the sponsorship or the money if you don't believe in the product yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there, for example, there might, the tire industry is probably a pretty good illustrator of that. And there's a lot of overseas, Chinese, Taiwanese tire manufacturers that are trying to break into the space here in the U.S. And they're, some of the products are actually really good. Some of the products aren't so good. Some of them are a branding exercise for a different company that's just trying to get distribution in the United States. And they're using people with, their marketing dollars to get that word out for them. But at the end of the day, if you don't believe in that product, but you're going to take the money, you're never going to be the right kind of ambassador for that brand. It's going to backfire on you because the things you come up with aren't going to be as good. And it's going to backfire on your sponsor because they're not going to be happy with what you put out. So you really got to decide what's more important, me staying, within myself or me getting the money. And I think you have to stay true to who you are when you're accepting sponsorships. And I know it's hard to say, and people be, yeah, but this is my shot at racing this season. And if there's a will, there's a way. You'll figure out how to make it happen. But it's hard to complete the task at hand when you don't believe in the people supporting you and just going after the money. So I'd say use that as a cautionary tale to people who have some options in the work. It's probably better to associate yourself with, better brands, well-known brands, unless you are really passionate about, hey, this is my buddy's company and he's starting out and I believe in it and I ride him to the end. And that's great. But in the world of, you've got options, the most money isn't always the best way to go.
Yeah, I actually just did a show about this. It was a live show. I just released it. And it was talking about making a decision. Do you go after sponsorship or do you go after purchasing whatever it is that you need? And there's a couple of elements there that are very, they make sense with this conversation here too, because sometimes it is your friend. Sometimes it is you already have that relationship, but maybe you don't believe in the product, and you have to make that choice. Do you support them or not? And that, I can't make that choice for you. You have to make that choice. But it's all about what's authentic to you. What really aligns with your values. And I can't overstress it more. Sometimes I think it sounds a little like if especially if people are listening to the show for the first time, they're like, come on, guys, this sounds kind of goofy here. I'm just telling you, this is real. This is real stuff. This is how it works. And it feels so much better when you're aligned with a company that you truly support. You truly value what they do. You truly value their products. It's just a way better experience than just getting a payday one day and an awkward relationship every other day.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's super important for people to stay true to themselves in anything you do. But the more authentic you are, that's the reputation you're going to get for being good in business.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of different channels that you're involved with. I mean, obviously the Truck Show podcast is in the podcast world, and all of the different outlets that you have through MotorTrend Group. But I mean, what are some of the ways that your group focuses on, bringing value for your partners or for your own brand?
I guess it's a hard question to answer because there's not really a good one. With the industry being so fragmented, people are all over the place, right? You're in social media, you're in print, you're in digital, you're on podcasts. And so you're chasing that audience around. And so I think that rather than chasing pure numbers like you might in the social world, you should be chasing things that are high engagement and things that are going to move the needle as far as your audience goes and them, purchasing product or whatever. So on the magazine, I say magazine loosely, obviously we're more than magazines now,
Yeah.
But on the enthusiast media side, we have many platforms, right? We have the ability to put things out on all the majors as well as print and podcasting and all that. one of the strategies that we came up with the podcast was we knew we were starting at zero. So we were having a new brand. We knew that, we didn't have any listeners. We knew that we didn't have a following, but we needed to get some sponsors to sign on to pay for the show. And so what we did was we used our massive scale in terms of audience with our social brand and our network newsletters and our digital properties. And we created an ROI opportunity where we weren't going to be able to guarantee you full ROI from the first, year of the show as we grew. Where you were going to get your ROI was accessing our social with article recaps, accessing our newsletter with those article recaps, and then our digital with those episode recaps. So we had articles that would do an episode recap, and then we blast them out everywhere. So that gave the impressions and the eyeballs that we needed to justify their expenditures. And so you have to be really creative. So people were really shocked to find that we signed Nissan within 3 months as our presenting sponsor within 3 months of the launch of the show. And then, I believe it was end of summer last year, so almost coming up on a year now, we signed Addict as an associate sponsor. And so we have two great companies. Nissan just re-upped, and I won't tell you the amount, but it was for more than they paid last year because they were so happy with the performance of the holistic ROI. That wasn't just the show, but it was throughout our network. What was nice about it is it allows them, they've been a great partner, by the way, because they don't dictate what our content of the show is. So because they don't dictate that, they don't say, well, you can't talk about Rand, you can't talk about Ford, you can't talk about any of these. They allow us full, editorial license to talk about whatever we want. But in each of those shows, their brand and their name is associated with that, and they're accessing, potential buyers or enthusiasts or customers every single show. And so you have to think outside the box. If we were to just have launched this podcast and only done social, we probably wouldn't be anywhere near the number of downloads that we have or the size that we are. And so, with things being fragmented, it's really important to be strategic with where you land. You sort of have to be everywhere at the same time because you don't want to miss anybody. But if you can be strong on one platform and sort of stick your tentacles out in other places to bring people in and then sort of, group them up and bring them into the one that seems to be the most successful as kind of the clearinghouse for everything, that seems to be, a strategy that's worked for us.
Yeah, that's really good. I like the term that you're using there too, fragmented. It kind of summarizes how the world is. I notice it when I'm putting together metrics and stuff for the show too. I'm like, okay, oh shoot, what was my YouTube? Okay, yep, got that. Oh, I forgot about Twitter. Shoot, who cares about Twitter, right? I forgot about Twitter.
Yeah, right.
Let me pull that in. Like, you forget about these things and all these different elements. Sometimes it's pretty complicated, honestly. But there was one other thing too I wanted to highlight from what you just said, and it kind of just made me really appreciate the sponsors that have been involved with this show. AMSOIL was my title sponsor throughout the last full year, and then right now 4-Wheel Parts came on, and AMSOIL's still on as a sponsor. But at no point did either AMSOIL or even at this point 4-Wheel Parts dictate what I can cover or not cover. I mean,
sure, that goes back to authenticity, right? Is you pick the right sponsors, we picked the right sponsors who allowed us to be us and believed in us for being us. And weren't necessarily worried about brand messaging that might step on what they're doing. What they were more worried about or more interested in is that their name was going to be out all the time in front of potential, enthusiasts that they want to interact with. And so that's part of choosing the right partners.
Yeah, I guess I've just kind of taken it for granted until this point. I've had guests on here that have, been sponsored by Lucas Oil and which is a direct competitor to AMSOIL, and we talked about it from the get-go. They're like, no, that's fine. I mean, obviously we don't want Lucas Oil paying you to do a show. That's a problem. But
right.
I've had MBRP has been one of my sponsors for a long time, and sure. they were cool with having the GGB, one of the reps, come on here and talk. And just shoot 2 episodes ago, somebody who has UTV cage fabrication company, Spangs Fab, came on to talk, and Crash Addict Industries has been one of my sponsors for quite some time now, and that's what they do. They're direct competitors. But I mean, everybody's been cool with that stuff, and nobody's really taking me down any paths, and they've allowed me to do the shows that I want to do, that's pretty cool. So hey, thank you everybody for doing that. That's awesome. I appreciate it.
That behooves them as well, right? So I think even I know we use the term sponsorship because of the title and everything.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's a partnership, and it goes both ways, right? And as important as it is for them to find an outlet like our shows that they can access people, it's just as important for us to find, partners that'll let us be authentic and genuine and true to ourselves. And it shows that those brands aren't afraid of being who they are or allowing their partners to be who they are. And that goes back to authenticity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that was kind of a key transition point there. You just talked about the term partnership versus sponsorship. We talk about that on this show quite a bit, and every time I'm like, dang, the name of the show, come on now.
Yeah, right.
Because I remember when I first picked the name for the show, I mean, I was really trying to target I wanted the backcountry riders to feel accepted, and I also wanted a lot of the motorsports and motocross and ATV riders to feel accepted. And that was my main target. And then I was like, wow, this world is so much bigger than that. And then everybody started saying it's actually partnership is the real way of saying it. I was like, yeah, but who would know what the Partnered Rider Club podcast is?
Right.
Like, I don't think they get that. But I have literally considered changing my name of the show because of that same reason. I'm like, it just doesn't fit with what I actually want people to be doing. But
don't do it though, because it allows you to you're defining that for what makes sense for you. So
yeah,
now
exactly.
you may you're making it, you're redefining it. So I think once you stick to something like that, you just roll with it, and you market it and let people know. No, I named it this way. I know what I'm doing. I got you.
Exactly. And now I got a story. I can talk about it every other episode. But
exactly.
No, but the partnerships, the relationships in your world. I mean, how have you even gone about forming those? I know that we could spend 3 or 4 hours just talking about that, but I mean, what's the key there?
I think the key is to have genuine personal relationships with people. I found that the partnerships that have lasted longer than a simple sponsorship or an advertiser has always been with people that I have made friends with over the years. We understand each other, that, if there's an issue, we trust each other to fix that issue. And what I would say is it seems like the people that you form real, honest relationships are the ones that want to come back for more. Because let's face it, we all want to work with people we enjoy working with. We all want to be around people we enjoy, and we're in an enthusiast space. So if you don't enjoy it and the people you're talking about don't get you, what's the point? And so I would say that real, honest, personal relationships have been the key to, staying together. And then also consistency, consistently delivering and performing is the best way that you could do to keep the love going. Right.
Yeah. And that's important for content creation across the board. I mean, obviously social media pays attention to consistency from how their algorithms are set up. Now, trust me, I haven't figured it out, but if you have good, strong consistency with your posts, you're going to have better responses. And then we've been talking a lot about podcasts on the show today. There's a huge element of consistency to that. I know some shows that have come and gone, and since I've been doing these, and they'll get one out 1 week, and then 3 weeks later they'll get one out, and then a month later one, and then a day after that one. Especially
in podcasting, you have to be consistent. Yeah. That's like the number one rule. I'm doing a seminar SEMA this year on podcasting for people interested in that's going to be one of my number one talking points is consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something I learned before I even started the show. I was a podcast consumer before I started this show, but I had never produced anything like this. And that was something I learned very early on from people who had, coaching me on starting podcasts is like, if you're going to do it weekly, do it weekly. Like never, ever miss a show. I'm like, ever? Like ever. And I haven't yet. I've come close a few times. I got laryngitis once. It was actually at the beginning
man.
of this year. Oh my goodness, it was 5 weeks. Luckily, I had 5 weeks of shows pre-recorded, but I burned through my buffer. But yeah, I've been producing a show, at least one show every single week since I started in December of 2016, and then I do 2 live shows a month. But that started later on. I'll tell you what, you just got to hammer it, and and that same goes if you're a racer. Like after every race, do your race report. If you're a
100%.
snowmobiler, after every trip, create your video or post up whatever your thing is like that you did. If you're doing email marketing for your race program, like consistent once a week, once a month, I don't care what it is. Just always get it out there. It's critical. Well, good. Well, hey, you know what else is critical is keeping your time in the best interest here. We have already kind of rolled through it. We've been rolling through right now, so I'm just gonna start wrapping things up here. I'm gonna ask one more, maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. First is on this lessons learned piece. I love asking people, especially who have got a lot of experience. I just had Scott Harden on the show of Best in the Desert, but he also spent 20 years in marketing at KTM. And this guy, we could have spent another 20 years just talking about lessons learned.
That's the great thing about certain guests, right? You can have them back on, and so
exactly.
You got lots to cover. You can do another show. It's all good.
Exactly. So this guy, he's got 40 years in motorsports, so it's just crazy. But either way, you got a lot of good experience here too. So what would be, I don't know, just a couple of quick lessons learned from your past successes, your past failures that our audience should be paying attention to?
I would say the number one thing that I would say is have a commitment to overachieve. Always do more than what you said you were going to do. Never overpromise, but always overdeliver. You will find success anytime that you do that. If you don't overpromise to close the deal, if you have to overpromise to close the deal, it's not the right deal. But if you can consistently have a commitment to overachieving and overdelivering, I guarantee you people are going to want to work with you and come back with you. And it's literally that simple. Yeah,
that's pretty huge. It's something that I've learned more in my professional career, the harder way, right? I signed myself up for a lot of stuff, and it sounds really great up front, and then 3 months later, someone's like, "Hey, did you get that done?"
Read the small print. I would say the other thing, is in a contract, read it all. I know that there's a lot of times it's boring boilerplate. But try and think of your situation, because I can't tell you how many times we've signed a contract that everybody thought we were clear on, and something came up that wasn't explicitly put in the contract. Fortunately, the majority of times you have a great relationship and you guys can work it out, and it's not a big deal. But there is the time where everybody's left going, well, what does this actually mean? And who's supposed to take care of it? And we didn't think through that contingency. The number one thing there is to make sure that you think through the things that can go sideways and be prepared for them and make sure they're covered in the contracts. Yeah,
and around the whole contract piece, some people are comfortable with handshake deals, and I'm not going to say anything against that. I definitely have operated on a lot of those, but it's good to have something, even small. I mean, some of the contracts that I've had with sponsors for the show have been 3-4 lines on a sheet of paper, essentially. I dress them up a little more than that, but like. It's good. It's okay to just capture some of those things, even if you don't call it a contract, call it expectations, call it goals, call it whatever you want.
And don't be afraid to use common language to distill it down to what the contract is actually, trying to say. Like what I like to tell people is ask what a win looks like to your partner, because a lot of times the contract will say X, Y, Z, and you're like, well, I don't really know how to distill that into like a layman's term. So if you were to ask your partner, say, well, okay, here's the contract, I understand, but what does a win look like to you? And then try and over-deliver on that win, because they'll tell you in plain English what they're trying to achieve without all the lawyers in between. And if it's something simple that says, well, at the end of the day, here's what we expect, here's the numbers, here's the percentage, here's the dollars, whatever, go out and do that. And if you feel confident in doing that, then it sounds like it's going to be a good partnership.
Definitely. Well, good deal. Well, hey, we're going to wrap things up here at the finish line, and I always ask this in every single show I've done, so back to that consistency piece. What is one thing that our listeners need to take away from this conversation? So I asked that from the standpoint of, like, we just covered a lot of stuff. People are going to forget stuff. What do you want them to absolutely not forget?
I would just say, going back to, even though you're in the creative space and there's a lot of competition and there's, a lot of people fighting for sponsorship dollars or support, always be, credible, genuine, and true to yourself. And if you do business that way, you're going to do business with some of the best people in the industry. Don't sacrifice your values for a quick buck or another race. Really stand on your principles, because like I said, if there's a way to make it happen, you'll make it happen, but don't sacrifice who you are to do that. And then secondly, listen to more podcasts, especially the truck show.
That's it. So that's a good lead in as well. What's the best way for people listening to connect with you or to get more of you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at Sean P. Holman, so SeanPHolman. And then if you're interested in any of my work brands, fourwheeler.com or trucktrend.com are the two websites all of my brands are at, with the associated socials. And then Truck Show Podcast is everywhere. We're on Apple, Google, Stitcher, iTunes, Pandora, every podcast, Spotify, at Truck Show Podcast on the socials. And then, of course, email truckshowpodcast@gmail.com.
Perfect. And odds are pretty high that if you have found this show, it's not going to be very hard for you to find the Truck Show Podcast. Most likely at this point, by the way that I've titled this show, which I haven't done yet because we're still recording it, but it's going to say the Truck Show Podcast in it, which means it's probably going to be pretty easy for you to find this other show. But if you struggle with that, let me know, and I will help you connect it to.
Cool.
I really appreciate this, Sean. This is a blast. I wish we could do this just like for the next 2 or 3 hours, but maybe your point, you have to come on again, and we'll get caught up.
Would love to.
Awesome.
Right,
well, hey,
I appreciate your time, and it's been great to talk to you about this. This is sort of a fun area of expertise that I'm going to talk about too much, so I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to leave you with this. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club Podcast, which is powered by 4-Wheel Parts. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming shows. Follow us on social media as well. That's where we share a lot of information and upcoming guests for the show. Pay specific attention to our Facebook page. That's where we do our live shows 2 each month. To get some insider access and upcoming guests, you can also check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. That also offers a forum for best practices sharing, so you can ask questions and get answers from the motorsports community. A special thanks goes out to our sponsors, 4-Wheel Parts, AMSOIL, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, Diode Dynamics, and High Octane Coffee. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.